Hi everyone, today let's take a quick look at the VP debate and recap some of the talking points. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. Overall, I have to say this debate did seem more productive than the previous presidential debate. There was more talking points that were actually deeper on the issues and talked about real solutions, to the point where when we started to talk into actual policies, they did get cut off a little bit, which I thought was unnecessary. It seems like they should have been allowed to finish some of those talking points out, but I think that was probably to the detriment of Walz, and that's part of why they cut it off. But it is what it is on that. They did mention a big blind spot was Ukraine. They didn't really talk about it a whole lot. There's a lot of sentiment from the right that the United States should generally leave Ukraine alone, and that we're continuing to perpetuate a war there, which is probably true to some extent, but the question is, what can we do about it? Should we abandon them completely? Probably not the right answer, and we definitely need to stay engaged with our NATO allies. So that part was missed a little bit. In terms of solutions for working families, how are they actually going to bring prices down? There was a little bit of debate on that. Most of it was from the energy side, saying that we need to reduce energy costs. Interestingly, they did find a fair amount of common ground, at least at the end point of some of their policies, but the question of how do we get to those is the bigger issue. Cutting some red tape in order to get construction of housing was a big talking point. How do we get more houses, more supply? And then JD Vance kept pushing it from the immigration perspective. There's too much demand for the current housing, which is a valid point. It is a supply and demand issue. There is a lot of demand and not a lot of supply, and they were on opposite sides of the issue with that. Arguably, both points are valid. We need more supply, but we also need to reduce demand with illegal immigration. There was certainly more civil during this debate than the presidential debate. I don't know if that's just the nature of these politicians versus Donald Trump, but it seemed more productive, like I mentioned. Walz was definitely nervous. You could see it on his face. I'm sure there's a ton of memes already going around about his face, whereas JD Vance felt comfortable. It seemed like he was confident. You can kind of see it here. He just looks like he's having a good time, which was fair. He was very smooth, very confident, seemed more presidential than Walz, just in an overall vibe. There was a couple of slips of the tongue from Walz where he said he was friends with school shooters. That's going around. I'm sure it was just a slip. I don't think that's actually true, but still a funny point. Pretty even on the talking time, 40.6 minutes versus 38.1. Childcare crisis was another point. How are they going to continue to raise the amount of childcare that's available? It's an essential service. It's very expensive. How do we tackle that? Not a whole lot of solutions, but they did both agree that it was a very important issue. Paid medical leave as well as parental leave, that was another big point. Again, this is something that's going to be led by the Fortune 500 companies. How are they going to take care of their employees? They did mention that the United States is one of the worst when it comes to this policy, which is fair. It hasn't really been addressed. And then climate change, obviously they were on separate sides for this issue. Vance said the US economy is one of the cleanest in the world. In terms of GDP to the amount of emissions, they did go back and forth on January 6th. I didn't find that to be super useful. JD Vance pushed the issue of Democrats pressuring social media, including Facebook ads, TikTok, X at the time, or Twitter. And this is definitely valid. Mark Zuckerberg most recently came out saying that they've felt pressure from Democratic administrations, limiting their speech and things that they should put out. And Walz pushed back with the January 6th event. I would argue that free speech is more systemic and something that needs to be addressed over a longer term versus January 6th, which was kind of a singular event with a relatively limited impact and limited amount of people. So I think you could make an argument that the social media issue is a bigger point, but to each their own on that one. When it came to abortion, obviously they were on both sides of the fence with that one. They did find a little bit of common ground. There is a federal ban on partial birth abortions, which means that people understand that there needs to be some limitation when it comes to abortion, but what is that point? Obviously, when it comes to rape and incest, those are horrific, which is fair. Again, we should have exemptions for those kinds of issues, which I think most people agree with, but there needs to be some limitation. When it comes to his home state of Minnesota, there are basically no restrictions. You can kill a baby right up until the minute of delivery, which certainly should not be the case. So definitely need to make some limitations there. $25,000 for home assistance, another talking point. This is basically just going to raise the cost of homes by $25,000 in my opinion. Maybe not $25,000 flat, but it's definitely going to increase demand and not increase supply, which is not going to make anything better. But it is a classic Democratic policy. Throw money at the problem and hope that works for the short term. Really, it's a supply and demand issue that needs to get addressed. When it came to tariffs, I think this is going to have a negative impact on the economy. Is the juice worth the squeeze on that one? Hard to say. Biden did did continue the Trump policies after he won, so apparently it's worth it for now, but will it change in the future? It's hard to say. Then they caught Walz in a lie, and he basically left that alone, saying he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square massacre. He basically admitted that he wasn't there and that he just bumbled it, but there have been many points where he was just caught in a lie, and he just danced around the answer on that one. And then, like I talked about, they did cut the mics when they were talking about immigration. This has been a huge talking point for Republicans. I feel like the country is more leaning towards the Republican solution at this point because we are seeing an overwhelming of city infrastructure, schools, and facilities. And people are seeing that, and it's affecting their actual lives, which is never a good thing. And he tried to hammer in on that on actual policy, and they did cut his mic. I think that was a big win for him. Clearly, they didn't want him to talk about that. And then finally here, they were talking about the most recent hurricane, which has hammered North Carolina. There's definitely been some issues there. Of course, Walz took it towards the climate change issue, which certainly exists to some extent, but how much can we change it, and how are we going to change it? Really, there's been no movement on that. We've spent a lot of money with not a ton to show for it. And then the other issue here was that we've sent a lot of money to Ukraine and Israel, and we are not supporting the states in disaster areas within the United States. Again, I think a little bit more of an America First policy would be beneficial there. And that's pretty much it. That was the whole debate, in my opinion. Not a ton of meat, but definitely more than the presidential debate. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of the vice presidential debate. Was it better? Was it worse? What did you think from the economic perspective? I'm sure many of you will have lots of opinions on this one, but I thought it was worthwhile to talk about it. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.